these business leaders are involved with our organization is not only because it's because of their bottom lines, because they really do believe and value the contributions of immigrants and their hard work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victor Cornejo, and welcome back to the Tell Me Más podcast. It's been a while, for sure, but for good reason. For those of you that know me well, everyone who follows my little podcast and my social media clearly knows what I've been up to. But yeah, I haven't been able to really focus on the podcast because when I started the podcast in 24, I really did fall in love with the genre, and I just went down the wormhole. And, with the support of family and of amazing, generous friends, I got the opportunity to start my own business, which is the Tell Me More Studios here in downtown Dallas, where we provide the service of recording podcasts, conversations, content for business owners. And I couldn't be happier. I'm super, super excited to go down this adventure. Scared at the same time. So maybe we'll do a whole episode about what it's like to start a small business. And I promise I won't be selling anyone a course on how to become a millionaire overnight. Those courses, I won't do that. I feel like I have to start out being honest in where I am in terms of the topic we're going to be discussing. And the truth of the matter is, I'm angry. And, I'm just angry all the time, every day. Would you say, okay, Vic, well, maybe just stop watching the news? I can't stop watching the news. In my family, it's essentially a hobby. It's what we're so interested in. Every day I talk to my son who's in college right now. I talk to him every day. And we're always talking about politics, and it's important to us. It has become so much more important now because we're seeing things that I never thought we would be seeing. We're seeing actions being taken against certain communities. And I was born here in the United States, White Plains, New York, grew up there and outside of Houston, Texas. And I have always felt very, very comfortable. Like, yes, this is my home, but also very connected to my identity as Latin American. My parents being immigrants from Peru and Chile. And there's just so much that I'm seeing now that is upsetting and that I don't have the answer to. I don't have the solution for. I know that, this is a truly complicated issue. But I think what I've learned over time, especially through my soon-to-be therapist wife, is that when you're feeling powerless, frustrated, overwhelmed, it's okay to feel that, but why don't you talk about it? And I'm like, that's exactly why I started my podcast, Tell Me Más, because yeah, I want to learn. And I don't think that there's any better way to learn than to simply put your hands up sometimes and say, you know what? I don't know everything. What if I talk to someone who really does, who is in the trenches every day? So it's a great honor today to have in the studio Juan Carlos Cerda. He is the Texas State Director of the American Business Immigration Coalition, an organization I did not know about. It was a very interesting mission that I want to dig into a little more. So, Juan Carlos, thank you so much for making the time and making the drive. I wanted to limit that introduction just to your name and to your title, so that I want to hear from you exactly what your organization does and what the mission is and what you're currently working on. But before that, you have a really interesting story. And we only met just a few months ago when, a friend of ours, Pedro Lerma, brought together a few business leaders, folks that are working in immigration law to say, what can we do? How can we help? And just learning more about what you do, I didn't realize so much of your kind of life is informing that. So awesome. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it, for making the drive. But tell me about who you are.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victor. It's quite an honor to be here in your studio. It's very beautiful. And my wife is also going to become a therapist, and I'm also an immigrant. So those are two things that we have in common. And as you mentioned, I'm the Texas State Director for the American Business Immigration Coalition. We call it ABIC for short. And it's a group that's 1,700 CEOs and employers throughout the country. It's bipartisan, both Republicans and Democrats. And we promote what we call common sense immigration reform. This organization has been around at least since 2014, when the last major attempt to pass immigration reform passed. If you recall, in 2014, when Obama was president, there was a group called the Gang of Eight that tried to pass an immigration bill that would have given over 11 million people a path to citizenship while reforming the immigration system. And so the founder of our organization was John Rowe, the CEO of Exelon Corporation. It's one of the largest utility companies in the world, based in Chicago. And he got involved because in his spare time, he would go and educate students. He had his own charter schools, and he would teach history to students that just amazed him. And he would offer them jobs at his company, only to realize that they were undocumented students. They were dreamers who he couldn't legally employ. So he didn't want to just publish reports on the numbers of immigrants in Chicago. And our co-founder, Josh Hoyt, who is a major immigrant rights advocate nationally, he challenged him to do something more than just write about it, and to actually use his political capital with the Republican Party to try to get solutions. So that's how ABIC started, was in Chicago, in Illinois. They were able to pass driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. They were able to pass a law called the Trust Act, which prevents police officers from collaborating with ICE and immigration. And also they helped push the DREAM Act, which is a piece of legislation that would allow undocumented students to be able to get a path to citizenship. So that's how we started.
Gotcha. Now, like, I really want to dig in to exactly what the mission is, and what the initiatives are. Before that, you have a very interesting story. So you're an immigrant, right? Your family, your parents, immigrants. You are, is the terminology correct if I say you were a recipient of DACA? You're also a Yale alumni, right? So tell me that story. Tell me your family's story.
Yeah, my family is from San Luis Potosí, Mexico. My grandfather was actually a migrant farm worker who picked fruits and vegetables in the Rio Grande Valley during the 1950s. And he was able to get his green card thanks to being involved in that work. And my family came to the United States when I was 3 years old. My dad is an electrician and my mom is a factory worker. I have two younger siblings. My youngest brother is a U.S. citizen. He was born in Atlanta, Georgia. And my middle brother, he was also undocumented, became a DACA recipient, and was able to, thanks to marriage to his U.S. citizen wife, become a U.S. citizen himself. So I was undocumented for over 12 years. I grew up like any other American kid here in Dallas, in Pleasant Grove. I went to Edna Rowe Elementary School here in Dallas. My parents moved us out to Grand Prairie for my dad's job. And I went to Grand Prairie High School. I was salutatorian at Grand Prairie High School. And your average American kid, I played soccer. I was in junior varsity soccer. I was in academics, UIL competitions. And, I always knew this was an issue, that immigration was going to be part of my life. It was never.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
So at what point in your childhood did you realize that you're not here legally?
I think it was very clear from the beginning. I mean, I was 3 when I came here, but growing up, my parents were undocumented as well, and they always talked about it. It was not something that they shied away from in conversations with me, and it was something that came up every time we talked about going to college. Was, well, you're undocumented. Is it even possible for you to go to college?
Mm-hmm.
Because it became a explicit conversation about my status impacting my ability to pursue higher education. So it was part of the conversation, and we would see what was happening on TV back in, if you remember, in 2005, 2006, when there were bills to try to take away and to persecute immigrants and having them rounded up by ICE. We saw the protests from the immigrant, the Hispanic community on TV of the mega marchas back then.
Mm-hmm.
And that was inspirational because I saw the power of people speaking their voice and letting the country know that we were here. And also seeing undocumented students on TV, just like me, who were fighting for their ability to do something with their education. And these were folks that were like me, who grew up here, studied here. And I saw them advocate for the DREAM Act on TV. And that had a big impact on me. So it was always something that I knew was part of my life.
Okay, so I don't want to assume that everyone knows exactly what a dreamer is or what DACA is. Can you define that? Help us understand a little bit more.
Absolutely. A dreamer is someone who came to this country as a child and currently does not have permanent legal status. It was a name given to us by Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who's the original author of the DREAM Act, alongside Republican Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah, who, may he rest in peace. They co-sponsored this legislation because they came to know dreamers who came to this country as children, were studying, were very gifted and talented, but they weren't able to legally work because of their immigration status. And I was the part of the generation that saw students advocate for a solution to this problem of, one, we couldn't legally work, and two, there were many dreamers who were being deported during the Obama administration. People forget that Obama deported over 400,000 people.
Deporter in chief?
And one of them was my uncle, who was a law-abiding, hardworking immigrant, and they came and got him and my aunt. And so there were dreamers too who were being deported back then. And so dreamers asked Obama to protect us from deportation and give us a chance to work. And so that led Obama to create the DACA program, which stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that gives us a work permit, the ability to drive legally, and be protected from deportation for a period of at least 2 years. That's renewable so long as we pass a background check and stay in good standing. So it is a extremely beneficial program that I was able to apply for when I was a sophomore in college, and that completely changed my life. And I was going to Yale University at that time because I was earning a full ride scholarship, and that completely changed the game for me.
Wow. I mean, congratulations. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's a big deal. I mean, I'm sure, like so many other immigrant Latino parents, their greatest aspiration was probably for you to get a college degree, let alone a degree from Yale. And what was your major?
I was a history major.
A history major? That's amazing. That's amazing. So essentially, you're a sophomore. Well, you apply, you go through the whole process, you get yourself a scholarship to go to Yale. As a person without documentation, and your sophomore year, you get that documentation through the DACA program. What exactly did that mean for you? Like, how did that change how you saw your future unfolding?
I was inspired. Before DACA, I would never really share my story with anyone for fear that one, they would understand, and two, worse, that they would tell somebody else and it could lead to me getting undue attention. And when I applied for DACA and finally got it, I felt confident in sharing my story with others because I knew I was protected from deportation and I could apply to jobs. I got my first legal job as an IT assistant at Yale, and I was able to apply for something called advanced parole so that I could go study abroad with permission and come back legally so that you have a legal entry. That's one of
Right,
the things
right.
that gives you the ability to apply for a green card someday is if you have legal entry. So I was able to do that. I was able to go and see the world, see Europe, and it gave me a new perspective. My horizon completely expanded, and that's something that maybe U.S. citizens take for granted, but the ability to appreciate that, knowing what my parents had gone through, it was a big blessing, huge blessing.
Yeah. So you graduate and you go into education, right? You become a teacher. How long did you do that?
Yeah, it was the first job that was offered coming out of college, and I wanted to come back to Dallas and give back to my community. And knowing how important literacy was in my life, I wanted to teach kindergarten to help children learn how to read. And that was an amazing experience. I was in the classroom for 2 years through a program called Teach for America, and it was going great. But as you know, as a DACA recipient, you have to renew your work authorization every 2 years.
Okay.
And unfortunately, there was a situation in 2016 where even though I submitted the application with 5 months of anticipation, 5 months ahead of time, there was a delay at the agency that was handling my renewal. And unfortunately, they did not renew my work authorization on time. And the school district found out that I didn't have a valid work authorization. And they asked me to take an unpaid leave of absence, which dragged on for more than 5 weeks. And my students saw me one day, and the next day they didn't see me there for more than 5 weeks. And you can imagine a kid questioning, "Where's my teacher?" and
Right.
me being unable to really tell them in a way that makes sense to them why I couldn't be there. And that was a difficult
What grade
position.
was it? I'm sorry.
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten. Okay. Yeah. Eh, that's interesting, and just fascinating. Yeah, were you legal? No, but you did everything right. Went to school, got good grades, probably got a great SAT score, applied to Yale, graduate, and still kind of having to live in fear of what's going on. As someone born here, it's hard for me to really put myself in those shoes, the uncertainty. Like my entire career has been in multicultural advertising, and I've met a lot of folks that had work visas and said, yeah, I got laid off from my previous job. Like, I have to find a job or I'm going back. And knowing how hard it is, if you go back and reapply, you may get a visa again, or you may have to wait years upon years, right? And none of these folks were attempting to game the system, take advantage of it. They just wanted to work. They just wanted to be somewhere where they had the opportunity to grow. And it's just so complicated, the whole process, especially for those of us who never have to deal with it. My parents came to America, to New York, from Peru and Chile at a very, very young age, decades ago. When they were welcomed, they were like, yeah, just fill this paperwork out and come here, work hard, and fulfill that true American dream. And they absolutely did that. And much like your parents, their greatest aspiration was for my sister and I to get an education and go beyond a sort of the weight and baggage of being an immigrant and having to prove, your existence and that you belong. And, that I think that could probably be a whole other episode where it's like we were also charged with, hey, you need to represent all of those other little flags and you need to work hard and live that straight line because people will always assume they always want to tell your story on your behalf. And so, luckily, we got the opportunity to do that. And it is really difficult to watch, how even as someone who loves politics, the game of politics, determining the strategy of politics, seeing it, how so many people that I know that I interact with on a day-to-day basis expose myself to certain environments where people that were born here, raised here, can be made to feel like the reason you're not where you need to be as a young man, as an American young man, the reason you can't buy a house, why you can't talk to a woman at the bar, why you're not already a millionaire at 25. It's because of that. It's disheartening. It truly, truly is. Now, I'm really fascinated how you approach this topic because you're part of, this organization that is a coalition of business owners, right? What is the reason they even formed? Like what barriers, what issues were they trying to confront with the development of this organization?
As I mentioned, John Rowe had a big heart for immigrants, especially dreamers. And we were able to get other business leaders like Woody Hunt, based out of El Paso. He's the chairman of Hunt Companies, one of the largest real estate companies in the world. And he sees the contributions that immigrants make to the city of El Paso every day, where 25% of that city is foreign born. Not only that, but he, for decades, advocated for higher education for all Texans. And he has met dreamers like myself that are the product of higher education and have had a lot of success. We also have other business leaders like Carol Siegel, the co-founder of Crate and Barrel Furniture Stores. And, she's the founder of hospitals, and she has doctors who have DACA. She has workers at Crate and Barrel who have DACA, and she has funded scholarships for them to go to college. And then you have others like Andrew Tisch, the co-chairman of Lowe's Corporation Hotels, which own Live by Lowe's here in Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
And he has so many hotel workers who have temporary protected status. This is a program that allows immigrants from countries like El Salvador, Honduras, Haiti, Venezuela to work legally because they come from countries that are war-torn or have had natural disasters strike. And so those are the reasons why these business leaders are involved with our organization. It's not only because it's because of their bottom lines, because they really do believe and value the contributions of immigrants and their hard work. And so we actually have a track record of passing policies that help not only businesses, but immigrants and their communities. Just to give you two examples, very recent examples, we were able during the pandemic, when so many immigrants were left out of a piece of legislation called the CARES Act,
Mm-hmm.
which allowed US citizens to get stimulus checks when many people were laid off, the economy was tanking, businesses were closing. Even US citizens, 1 million of them who were married to undocumented spouses, were not able to get those stimulus checks. And our business leaders thought that was deeply unfair, especially the Republican business leaders, because they believe in the equality of all US citizens and the fairness of and the morality of marriage, and asking people to divorce their undocumented spouse just to qualify for a stimulus check, that didn't seem right to them. So we were able to persuade, and mind you, this was 2020. This was during that very important election. We were able to persuade Senator John Cornyn from Texas and 16 other Republican senators to co-sponsor a bill that allowed each of these US citizens to get access to the stimulus check. And ultimately, President Trump ended up signing that bill into law. And so many people didn't believe that you could pass a piece of policy that helped immigrant families, because these are immigrant families. They just happen to be married to a US citizen. So that was a big accomplishment. And it shows that you can work in a bipartisan fashion if you not only use elections to your advantage, but also you use the power of families and U.S. citizens.
So your organization, safe to say, this is a bipartisan group of people coming together to develop that common sense immigration reform. Now, I am significantly older than you, and I've heard that phrase for absolutely decades. And the truth is like I tend to lean one way, but I'm extremely critical of both parties because this common sense immigration reform, like I'm not going to make any qualms about it, but could it have been passed before? Yeah. Why hasn't it? Well, because it's a great issue to run on. The most recent example of that is in 2024. A Republican senator out of Oklahoma, extremely conservative, helped write that bill, had, support for it for sure. And it gets killed because a presidential campaign is coming up. And it's a great issue to campaign on. And I would love for you to describe what that common sense immigration reform actually means. What is that? This huge, enormous thing that simply cannot be accomplished by the wealthiest, most talented, most capable country in the entire world. Somehow we can't get it done. But what is it exactly?
That common sense is a family. Everybody can relate to the concept of a family. A husband, a wife, children, being able to have a job, have a livelihood. That's something that every American can relate to. And one of the things we were able to do with a Democratic administration, in this case, the Biden administration, you mentioned 2024, and that was a year when we were able to get the Biden administration to issue an executive order after so much advocacy because, Biden didn't want to do more for the immigrant community. And we were able to get him to create a program called Keeping Families Together. This is a program that allowed over 2,000 undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens to be able to apply for a work permit while they wait for their legal process to get processed. And why did the Biden administration do this? Again, elections, 2024, Biden was getting a lot of flack, a lot of criticism for the economy, the high prices, and also what people perceive to be an open border and the highest surge of immigration in our nation's history. And so we were able to get them to look at a common sense solution to get the support of Hispanic voters for that election. And that was these 500,000 US citizens who they've been trying for years to adjust their spouse's immigration status, but haven't been able to for various reasons. For example, somebody entered illegally, you're not able to get a green card as a result of that. So we were able to persuade them to do this common sense policies, just allow them to get a work permit while they wait for a green card. And that was a big accomplishment. Unfortunately, the program was sued by our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, here in Texas, and a court got involved and ruled that the program could not move forward. And then the Trump administration came in and dismantled it. But that's just like one example of what is common sense. It's, well, help an American family with the U.S. citizen by allowing them to stay with their spouse in this country instead of exporting them to another country where their talents will go to waste. So that's an example of common sense.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have the advantage of living in a large metropolitan area, Dallas, Fort Worth. We all know people that are undocumented. We know that they're contributing, and in my previous career life, quite honestly, for 25 years, I've been hearing the statement, yeah, this is a $6 trillion spending, consumer, fourth largest GDP of any group, in the world, outpacing countries such as Brazil and Canada in this. But there is a moral aspect to this. And, I can't help but to bring up, we're in the middle of January. Last night, we all see a 5-year-old child being detained, whose, father was getting detained. And apparently now both father and son are in Texas. I think we were all told we're going after the worst of the worst. This is a guy who didn't have, as far as we know, didn't have any criminal record whatsoever. And his son goes away. There's laws. Yeah, we're law-abiding people. That's frankly one of the reasons you come to this country, is because we are law-abiding. We actually believe in that. But then there's also common sense too. Okay, that father was here illegally. Great, we have to take care of that. Look, even though you've gone to all of your appointments, that you're supposed to, even though you came in without documentation, but you presented yourself and surrendered yourself to the process, through the CP app, yeah, and you're given that time. Can't we take a pause and say, hey, this guy has a job, wife has a job, kids going to school. You need to get this taken care of in a year. And so much of it feels like, so much of what we're seeing feels like the ugliness, the cruelty of it is almost part of the show, which is, I think in direct contrast to the people that make up your organization that perhaps may support this administration, may donate, may support President Trump in a lot of things. But I think it's so easy to bury everyone within these little boxes, because no, I'm not going to accept the argument that this is exactly what they wanted, that this is, how they envisioned this administration, because we're not talking about your neighbors and not just people that work for you, because let's dispel the myth. One of the most frustrating things that I keep hearing is not all Latinos, whether they're illegal or legal, are farm workers or work in hotels, or restaurants. No, they work in all fields. And it is, I think, so interesting when this group comes together as business owners to say, look, they're a part of the fabric of our companies. We are job creators, we are economy creators, and we need that work. And these people are here to work hard. They're not here to suck anything off. They're not here to take advantage of the system. And I think if you tell the average American that, they understand that. How difficult has it been to get legislators to sort of listen to this message, even when it comes from some of the most important people that donate to their campaigns? Like, how open are they to that discussion?
It has been challenging, but I think ultimately what determines a legislator's support is, one, their proximity to the issue, whether they understand the issue of immigration personally in a way that, for example, that they know a dreamer, or maybe they were taken care of by an immigrant. That's one. And then two is elections. So we recently took two trips actually, to Washington, D.C. last year, where we took over 190 business leaders representing construction, hospitality, senior care, and Hispanic business. And we met with over 204 congressional offices, major ones like not only our U.S. Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, but Democrats like uh, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Leader John Thune, and even the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. And what we learned was just a couple of things. One is that the Republicans recognize that business is being disrupted, that they're losing public support on immigration, with now 59% of the American public against the president's immigration enforcement. Two is that Democrats also, we have to actually push with them too, because this issue could fall down in the list of priorities if we don't talk about it enough. And then three is that ultimately they're looking at the 2026 midterms and the public opinion on immigration, especially among Hispanics. And that is the silver lining in all of this, is that so many Hispanics understand where they came from. They understand, that they came from Mexico, they came from El Salvador, Honduras, Colombia. And when they're seeing these images of people who are law-abiding, who are working hard, they're paying their taxes, they don't like that. They don't like that image. And they cite immigration as their number two concern after the high prices and the sluggish economy. And so that's polling that we presented to members of Congress.
And that's sort of new, because immigration was never a top 5, issue for the Latino voters that could vote. That is very recent, which is amazing. So one of the things that you brought to my attention was a very localized example of this issue. Omar Salazar. What's his story?
Omar is a dear friend. I got to know him during the pandemic when he was starting his business, and I learned a lot about him. He's a dreamer just like me. He came in 2008 with his family when he was 8 years old, and he happened to come 1 year and 1 day after the date that you're supposed to come if you want to qualify for DACA, which is 2007. So because of that, he was not eligible to apply for DACA. So he's what we call an undocumented dreamer. And he grew up here in Dallas. He went to a magnet high school here in Dallas. He was valedictorian. He went off to SMU here in Dallas, majored in human rights, was part of a fraternity, a very respected community member, and doing everything that an American kid, American college student should be doing. But the one thing that held him back from achieving more was his immigration status. So what he decided to do was start a business that helps nonprofits translate documents, and he did analytical work for them. And he eventually got his certificate in artificial intelligence from the University of Texas and started doing more contracts with nonprofits here in Dallas. So he was slowly but surely, he was earning an income. He met his now wife, who was a U.S. citizen. He was able to marry her, and they were planning on getting married traditionally through the Catholic Church. But while visiting her in Lubbock, Texas, while she was studying at Texas Tech, he merged onto a lane, forgot to flip his blinker, and a police officer from Lubbock Police Department stopped him and asked him for his driver's license. And of course, as an undocumented dreamer, he can't apply for a driver's license the way you can when you have DACA. So he showed what a lot of Mexican residents here in Dallas show or have, is his Mexican matricula, his matriculate card. And the police officer immediately called ICE on him. And
I'm sorry, when was this again?
This was late August of last year, of 2025. Okay. And they took him to the Lubbock local jail. And because they have an agreement with ICE to notify them when somebody's undocumented, ICE quickly came and picked him up And that's when he literally called me as ICE was going to take him to the detention center. And so he's been in Anson, Texas at the Bluebonnet detention facility for now 3 months. To this day, he is detained and he has not been able to get out despite multiple requests from his attorney showing that he's had good conduct. He's never had any criminal record. He's an upstanding community resident, deeply educated. And now he's married to a U.S. citizen wife. And still, they have rejected to let him out because there's a new policy from the Trump administration that requires anybody who entered illegally, it doesn't matter how educated you are, what age you came, you have to be detained unless you deport yourself. And so that's been a really tough situation for his wife, who is currently attending law school and really needs his support, and for his family, because he was one of the breadwinners for his family.
What is the current state of his case? Like, what's the next step? He's detained right now. What's the next step?
His final merits hearing is next Friday, January the 30th. And what that means is that is when the judge will determine whether he stays in the United States or if he is deported back to Mexico. And we think that he has a good case because he's married to a U.S. citizen, and that carries a lot of weight, being able to show that somebody here in the United States actually needs you. And two, he has so many community stakeholders who are U.S. citizens who can vouch for him, can show just how helpful he's been to them. And then lastly, he's a contributor. I mean, just on that alone, the fact that he's worked hard. Entrepreneur. He has a skill set that this country absolutely needs, which is artificial intelligence. You know, this is something that our leaders are talking about every day, about how to be competitive in this new day and age, especially in this world where we compete against countries like China and Russia. This is a guy, Omar's a guy that we need to keep in this country instead of having him sent back to Mexico, where, you know, he doesn't remember since he was a kid. So we are trying to get him out, and we're having a press conference this January 27th here in Dallas, asking ICE to release him and to pass a solution for dreamers like him so that they can stay in this country.
I feel like a lot of people that I don't speak to, that I read their comments or overhear kind of their conversations, like very surface level. I think I would hear, well, sorry, like, you're illegal. Like, you should have never come. Someone should have never brought you. But I do have the experience of, no, let's actually talk about this particular case. And it's true that when you really get to know the story, you realize that guy is just like your kid, man. It's just like me, just someone who was trying hard, doing everything right. Yeah, he was here illegally. But shouldn't we take the time, the investment to go through the process and say that human being is literally contributing, to this society? And I've had those conversations with some of those folks, and that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations and tell these stories. Yeah, we're not going to change it overnight, for sure. But I really do appreciate your advocacy on behalf, of this person and all the other people that, your organization is, trying to assist. Is there a way that those of us that want to help, don't know exactly how to help, can help with that particular case, or, spread the word about his process? Is there anything that we can do?
Two things. I'm very proud to be Hispanic, and I know many people who listen to your show are also proud to be Hispanic.
Only 5 people listen to it.
And there will be more. And it just so happens 1 in 5 people in the United States are now Hispanic or Latino.
Correct.
And this election is going to be so important to show the power of Latinos and Hispanics. We have 36 million eligible voters, $4.1 trillion in spending power. We'd be the fifth largest economy in the world. So the number one thing that you can do is go and vote this election cycle in each of the races that are happening, because the decisions that led to Omar being detained come from the very top, from our elected leaders. So we have to show the power of our vote. Two, to help Omar specifically, is contacting your member of Congress, your representative, about supporting solutions like the DREAM Act, which will allow individuals like Omar to be able to get a path to citizenship, or other pieces of legislation, for example, the American Families United Act, which would allow the spouses of US citizens to be able to also get a path to legal status. So those two things would tremendously help Omar. There are so many hundreds of thousands of individuals like him who are currently detained, and it's a systemic issue. So we have to address the root of the problem, which is the broken immigration system.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I wish there was a way that we hold the entire political class, everyone who donates, or is running for office, and saying, there's like legit threats out there. Other countries that are simply trying to win, just like we are. And we need to solve this thing because, hey, we need to really start doing some catch up in a lot of different areas. And we're just fighting amongst ourselves. Like, it's tearing this country apart. And I just have a feeling that if we could get everyone at a barbecue, at a carne asada, and put the facts out there, saying, if we don't unite, it's not because of a bot isn't going to be the cause. AI is not going to be the cause of why we are so far behind. It's our division. And I just get the sense that so many of these other countries are like, look at them. Just look at them fighting amongst themselves. And they don't have to do a thing. They just sit back and just watch this, So, I really do hope. I'm a skeptic by nature, and I'm trying not to be. I really, really am. But I do want to thank you for the work that you do, the amount of time you dedicate to it, the passion with which you attack it, the fact that you are working with people that I would assume right off the bat couldn't care less. They're just profit oriented. And I know that's not the case, and I have to continuously remind myself that that's not the case. Don't let the strategy take over your humanity. So, yeah, I can't wait to learn more. Please, count on me here to help spread the message, and I think you're doing great work. Seriously, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Victor, and you, like me, must feel very proud to be Hispanic and to uplift our community. And let's work together to show the collective strength of Hispanos here in the United States this year.
Work together amongst ourselves and everybody else. Like, we can't let them take over the whole argument. No, we're not as divided as they want to make us think. So, again, thanks for taking the time, for coming in, and let's keep going.
Thank you, Victor.